All right, so I know I love a good post-apocalyptic story.
Yeah.
Andy, of beautiful animated film.
Yeah.
And this film we're diving into today, Flow from 2024, seems to check both those boxes.
Yeah.
We've got a glowing review here that we're going to unpack.
Yeah.
But this is going to be more than just a typical, thumbs up or thumbs down.
I felt, yeah.
We're going to really get into what makes this film so unique.
Right.
And hopefully spark your curiosity to check it out for yourselves.
Sounds good.
So right off the bat, the premise itself is pretty captivating.
Yeah.
No dialogue.
Nope.
Just a black cat
Yeah.
and its animal companions navigating a flooded earth.
Quite a visual.
Yeah, so it's a story told entirely through visuals and sound, which immediately makes me think of silent films, like the classics.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because it's not really trying to replicate those old silent films.
Right.
It's taking that concept of purely visual storytelling and applying it to a modern setting with modern animation techniques.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I got to ask, how do they pull that off?
How do they make it engaging without any dialogue?
Exactly, and this review mentions a painterly aesthetic mixed with dreamlike realism.
Right.
I mean, what does that even look like on screen?
Well, first you have to consider the director, Gints Zilbalodis.
Okay.
He uses Blender for this film.
Blender.
Yeah, the open source animation software.
Oh, wow. So it's got that indie spirit right from the start.
Absolutely. And I think that really comes through in the visual style.
So how would you describe that style?
Well, imagine this. Okay, you've got this cat.
Our protagonist.
Right, the main character, a black cat navigating this flooded earth.
Okay.
And it's not alone. It's got this little crew.
A crew.
Yeah, a capybara, a Labrador, a secretary bird.
Wow, what a mix.
All aboard this tiny sailboat.
A sailboat.
Yeah, picture it bobbing through these flooded streets.
So like submerged cities.
Exactly, and you've got these ruins of skyscrapers piercing the water's surface.
I'm picturing like half-sunken buildings with vines growing all over them.
And the sunlight filtering through the water, casting these long, distorted shadows.
Okay, now that's where the dreamlike realism comes in.
Right, you've got these familiar elements, but rendered in a way that feels almost surreal.
Yeah, I get it. It's like reality, but just slightly off kilter.
And that's where the painterly aspect comes in, too.
Okay. So
The way Zilbalodis uses color and light, it's not hyper-realistic, it's more impressionistic.
So it's like we're looking at a moving painting.
Exactly. There's this texture to the animation, a sense of brush strokes and movement.
Wow. It sounds visually stunning.
It really is.
So we've got this haunting, beautiful world
Yeah.
and these animal companions.
Right.
But you mentioned the cat as the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
How do they create a distinct personality without dialogue?
I mean, how much can a meow really convey? That's where the sound design becomes so important.
All right.
The review highlights the use of authentic animal sounds.
Really?
Yeah, no cartoonish voices,
What?
just the real a dog's whimper versus a bark,
Okay.
the different chirps and calls of the birds.
So it's like we're dropped right into their world.
It creates this surprisingly nuanced layer of communication.
Interesting.
And combine that with Zilbalodis' animation style,
Right.
which captures the subtle twitches of a cat's ear, the lumbering gait of a capybara.
So we're understanding them through their movements, too.
Exactly. And suddenly these archetypal figures...
The cat, the dog, the bird.
Right. They start to feel like individuals.
Like we can actually get to know them.
Even without them saying a word.
I see. So each animal becomes recognizable, not just by what they are, but by how they move, the sounds they make.
Exactly.
It's like we're forced to pay attention to the subtlest details.
Which is a really interesting way to engage the audience.
Yeah, I could see that.
You're not just passively watching, you're actively observing.
Okay, but here's where I get a little lost.
Okay.
The review calls Flow both a meditation and an adventure.
Yeah.
How can it be both?
You think those are contradictory?
Well, yeah, kind of.
That's a good point.
I mean, those seem like opposite ideas.
Right. Meditation implies stillness, quiet reflection, and adventure implies action excitement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do they reconcile those two
I
things?
think that's actually one of the film's strengths.
Really?
Yeah, imagine a scene where the animals are huddled together on the boat,
Oh.
rain's lashing down,
I'm picturing it.
and all you hear is the creaking of the gentle lapping of water against the hull.
Okay.
It's tense.
Yeah,
It's survival.
definitely.
But there's also this stillness to it.
A sense of calm amidst the storm.
Yeah, a sense of acceptance, even peace in the face of this harsh reality.
That's the meditation aspect.
Right.
But then you have moments where they're navigating treacherous currents,
Mhm.
encountering other creatures.
Maybe even facing threats.
That's the adventure.
Exactly. And Zilbalodis seems to be exploring the idea
Okay.
that these two states aren't mutually exclusive.
That we can have both.
Yeah, we can find moments of quiet contemplation.
Even within the struggle for survival.
Exactly. And it's this interplay between those two states
That makes it so compelling.
that keeps the audience engaged.
Now that you mention it, I remember a similar feeling from that old documentary Planet Earth.
Oh, yeah.
The incredible beauty of nature, but also the constant struggle for survival.
Right.
It sounds like Flow is tapping into that same vein, but with a fictional twist.
Exactly. It's taking that inherent tension that exists in the natural world
Yeah.
and amplifying it through this post-apocalyptic lens.
So it's not all just, cute animals on a boat.
Yeah.
There's this real sense of danger.
Absolutely. The stakes are high.
And it's not shying away from the harsher realities either.
Right. The review does mention some criticisms.
Such as
Specifically around pacing.
pacing.
Yeah, apparently the film can feel slow, especially early on, as it establishes this world and its unique rhythm.
So it's not like a fast-paced action film?
No, it's definitely more of a slow burn.
Or contemplative.
Exactly. And of course, the lack of dialogue could be a barrier for some viewers.
Yeah, I can see that.
Who are accustomed to more traditional storytelling.
Right, where they're spoon-fed the plot and the emotion.
Exactly. But for those willing to go on the journey, it sounds like it could be a powerful experience.
And I have to admit, the more we talk about it, the more curious I become.
You're getting hooked.
I think I am. This whole idea of communicating without words.
Yeah.
It's almost like a lost art form.
It is, in a way.
Like we've become so reliant on language.
Right.
That we've forgotten how to read the other signs.
The nonverbal cues, the subtleties.
And that's something Flow seems to be bringing back.
By stripping away all those layers, it forces us to pay attention.
To really see and hear the world around us.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how Flow uses this unique approach to storytelling.
Yeah.
But the review also mentions some pretty deep themes.
Right.
Like abandoning ego for collective survival. Is that just because they're all animals on a boat together?
It's a little more nuanced than that. It's more about, let me think. Yeah, it's more about, I guess, how their circumstances force them to abandon those ego-driven behaviors.
Okay, so it's not that they're inherently selfless creatures.
Right. It's more that the situation demands it.
Because if they don't cooperate...
You won't survive.
Right, so it's like the film is making a statement about...
In nature.
Yeah, are we capable of that same selflessness?
Especially when the stakes are so high.
And without the luxury of language to, smooth things over.
To manipulate or deceive.
Exactly. It's like their actions speak louder than words.
Which is kind of the point of the whole film, right?
I guess so. It's like we're seeing these primal instincts play out.
Stripped bare.
And it makes you wonder if we would resort back to that.
To that kind of raw survival mode.
If we were in a similar situation.
It's a thought-provoking question for sure.
And maybe that's why the pacing is so important.
How so?
Well, the review mentioned it being slow, right?
Yeah, especially early on.
But maybe that slowness is intentional.
To force us to really observe.
To sit with the discomfort of silence.
And to really pay attention to those nonverbal cues.
Because we can't rely on dialogue to tell us what to feel.
We have to arrive at those emotions through the purely cinematic language.
Of image and sound.
Exactly. It's a different way of experiencing a story.
And maybe a more powerful one?
Because it requires more from the viewer.
You're not just passively consuming.
You're actively participating.
In the meaning-making process.
And that can be really rewarding.
It sounds like it.
So we've talked about this idea of abandoning ego.
Right.
But there's another layer to this theme.
Okay, I'm listening.
The review also talks about the dissolution of individual identity into a collective whole.
Whoa. Okay, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a bit heady, but I think it ties into this idea of the characters being archetypes.
The cat, the dog, the bird.
Right, they're not given names.
Which makes them feel more universal.
Exactly. They represent something larger than just individuals.
So maybe the cat is our curiosity, our independence.
The dog, our loyalty, our need for connection.
And the bird, maybe a symbol of freedom, of seeing the bigger picture.
I like that interpretation.
It's like a silent post-apocalyptic Aesop's fable.
With these animal archetypes standing in for different aspects of human nature.
And they're forced to coexist.
To find a new balance in this altered world.
And maybe that's the key to survival.
Not just as individuals, but as a species.
Yeah.
It's like the film is saying that our differences don't have to divide us.
That we can actually learn from each other.
And become stronger together.
Okay. You've officially blown my mind.
I aim to please.
Seriously, though, this is making me think about the film in a whole new light.
That's what we're here for.
I was initially drawn to the visual aspect.
The painterly aesthetic, the dreamlike realism.
Yeah, but now I'm seeing how those visuals are working in tandem with these deeper themes.
To create a truly multi-layered experience.
It's like a visual puzzle box.
That you have to unlock.
And the lack of dialogue makes it even more challenging.
Because you have to really pay attention.
To all those subtle details, the nonverbal cues, the visual metaphors.
It's a film that demands an active viewer.
Someone who's willing to think critically.
And to engage with the material on a deeper level.
All right, I'll admit you've officially piqued my curiosity.
Knew you'd come around.
I was skeptical at first.
I get it. It's not your typical animated film.
But now I'm seeing Flow less as a movie.
And more as a...
work of art.
A visual poem, maybe?
Something that's meant to be contemplated and interpreted.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting.
So we've talked about the characters, the themes,
the
overall approach.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But there's one element that keeps popping up in the review.
What's that?
These reflections in water.
Ah, yes, the recurring motif.
Now that we've talked about these broader ideas.
How do those visual elements contribute
to the film's overall message?
That's a great question, and I think it deserves its own deep dive.
Well, then let's dive in. So these reflections, what's the deal with them?
Well, on a basic level, they're visually striking, right?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't love a good reflection shot?
Especially in animation where you can really play with the distortion.
Right. You can bend reality, make things surreal.
Exactly, and I think that's part of what Zilbalodis is doing here.
Okay, but how does that connect to those deeper themes we were talking about?
Think about how reflections work.
Okay.
They distort, they shift, depending on the angle.
Right. It's not a perfect copy.
It's a fluid interpretation.
So maybe that's a visual metaphor for how we see ourselves.
How our perceptions are always in flux.
Because our perspective is always changing.
Right, and so are our reflections.
So it's not just about the characters literally seeing their reflections in the water.
No.
It's about us, the audience, being asked to reflect on our own assumptions.
Our own bias.
Our own ways of seeing the world.
And remember, this is a world stripped of human constructs.
Of language, of the systems we use to define ourselves.
So those reflections in the water, maybe they're a prompt to strip away those layers.
To see ourselves in a more primal, essential way.
To connect with something deeper.
I like that. And it ties into that idea of abandoning ego.
Right. If you're constantly looking at your reflection, obsessing over your appearance.
Your status.
That's ego.
But in Flow, the characters are forced to look beyond themselves.
They see their reflections, yes.
But they also see the sky, the clouds, the other animals.
It's a visual reminder that we're part of a larger ecosystem.
That we're interconnected.
And that our individual identity...
They're just a small part of that larger whole.
Which brings us back to that idea of the dissolution of individual identity into a collective whole.
Right. It's like the film is visually representing that concept through these reflections.
By showing us how those reflections are always changing.
Always merging with the surrounding.
It's suggesting that our own sense of self is not fixed.
That it's fluid and interconnected.
And maybe that's the key to survival in this new world.
Letting go of our ego.
Embracing the collective.
And seeing ourselves as part of something bigger.
Than just our individual selves.
Wow. It's like Flow is giving us a whole new way of looking at the world.
And at ourselves.
Through these simple yet powerful images.
Of reflections in water.
So it's not just a technical achievement.
Or even just a story about survival.
It's a film that's asking us to reconsider
our place in the world.
Our relationship to each other.
And the very nature of our own identity.
I think that's a pretty profound message for a film with no dialogue.
I agree, and it's a testament to the power of visual storytelling.
That it can convey such complex ideas.
Without relying on words.
Well, folks, I think we've done it.
We've reached the end of our deep dive.
Into the watery depths of Flow.
And hopefully we've given you plenty to think about.
Whether you're a fan of animation or post-apocalyptic stories.
Or just someone who appreciates a film that challenges you.
We encourage you to seek out Flow and experience its silent beauty for yourselves.
And let us know what you think.
We're always up for a good discussion.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds flowing.
And remember, sometimes the most profound stories are told in the spaces between words.